This morning, we're going to start with a little bit of an activity. So I'm going to need you to shake it out a little bit. We talked about moving last week. So I said moving helps you feel better, right? Have a little more fun. So good news for you is just going to be your arms. So you're not going to have to stand up. You got to shake it out, shake it out. Okay, ready? So I'm going to put two words up on the screen. And you're going to look at the two words and you're going to think which one you like best. And then I'll name the words and you raise your hand for the one you like best, all right? So we'll do a pretty easy example at first. So we got pancakes or waffles. So if you like pancakes better, think about that. Or if you like waffles better, make your decision. I know it can be hard. I'm sorry, like French toast didn't make the board. I mean, I love French toast. But anyway, just choose between pancakes and waffles. So, okay, if you like pancakes, let's see your hand. Raise your hand. Okay, good. Waffles. Okay, pretty even split. Good, good. Okay, that was good. Good job. All right, second one. Mountains or beach? Which one do you like better? Okay, think about it. Got it. Okay, mountains. Okay, beach. Oh, all right. Pretty even there, too. That was good. All right, next one. Coffee or tea? Coffee or tea? Ready? So coffee. Okay, tea. Okay, this is good. You guys are pretty even on this. This is good. Couch or cardio? All right, so you like to sit on the couch or you like to be active? All right, so here we go. Couch, let's see, show hands. All right. Cardio. Yeah, a few of us. Okay, strong but mighty. That's good, that's good. Small but mighty. Good, okay. And the last one, this one we can maybe all resonate with right now. Summer or winter? Which season do you like better? Summer or winter? So summer. Okay, winter. All right, there are a few brave among us. Good, okay, great. So hopefully this was fun, right? A little lighthearted laughter to think about all the differences that we have in this congregation, right? Between coffee or tea or summer or winter. And it can be fun to talk about these small differences, right? As we look about that together. But what if I would have put up on the screen some harder things to talk about that we might disagree about? Like, what if I would have put up our thoughts about immigration? Or human sexuality, or healthcare, right? Things that we might have different opinions on or different beliefs, and we might start to deeply disagree with each other, and our laughter about coffee versus tea might turn into anger and almost hate for one another. We might say some things we regret and get really angry at each other, and all of a sudden our lighthearted fun might turn into this hatred or this difficult discourse that seems like so much of our conversations in the world today often turn into. And as a follower of Jesus, this deeply bothers me. Because as I was reading in Matthew 5 this week, Jesus says, you're familiar with the command to the ancients, do not murder. I'm telling you that anyone who is so much as angry with a brother or sister is guilty of murder. Carelessly call a brother idiot and you just might find yourself hauled into court. Thoughtlessly yell stupid at a sister and you are on the brink of hellfire. The simple moral fact is that words kill. Jesus is reminding us that it's not okay to murder people, and I think we all would say that. It's not okay to murder each other, but Jesus takes it a step farther and said it's not okay to be angry and hate each other. That when you're angry with each other, that's comparable to murdering each other. And this haunts me because sometimes we get most angry at the people closest to us, right? And Jesus is saying we should not be like that. We should not be people of anger or hatred. We should be people of love. That I'm convinced that the center question of Christianity is, what does love require? What does love require of me in this moment and the next moment and the next moment? How do I love God and love others as the center of my Christian faith? That I need to love people even who disagree with me, who think differently from me, even people I don't really like that much. I'm still called to love them. And I think as followers of Jesus, we have to master this and we have to understand this, and we can't give in to this hatred and anger that we see in our world all around us. I don't think that's the life that Jesus desires for us. And so today we're beginning this new sermon series titled Love Without Limits. And we're going to talk about love as the center of our faith. And I'm convinced that if we really learn how to love without limits, it will change our lives. It will change our marriages. It will change our family. It could even change the world if we really learn to love like that. So to talk about this morning, I'm going to invite you to pull out your Bibles or to grab one from the back of the pew and turn to Matthew chapter 22. And we're going to begin reading in verse 34. Matthew chapter 22, we're going to begin reading in verse 34. As you're turning there, I want to highlight one similarity that we all have, right? So we just talked about a bunch of differences that we had, like coffee or tea or mountains or beach, but all of us in this room have at least something in common, and that is at some point in our life, we have all gone to school, right? We've had some sort of education, whether it was a lot of schooling or a little schooling, public or private or homeschooling. All of us have gone to school growing up. And we might have had different experiences at school. We either loved or hated school. I actually, for the most part, really enjoyed school. I liked learning. I liked hanging out with my friends. I liked the extracurricular activities I did. But there was one thing about school that I really did not like. And that was pop quiz. Can any of you agree with this? Yeah, I just do not like pop quizzes. You know, like I can even handle tests because like you have time to study and prepare for those, right? I don't really love them, but you have time for that. Or I can handle writing papers, so it's the same thing. You have time to write and edit it. But pop quizzes, you have like no time to prepare. It's a surprise. And this would give me such anxiety or even like nightmares. Like I'm worrying about these pop quizzes. And I still remember this one fateful day, my junior year of high school. From that year, my homeroom was my AP calculus class. Now, I personally think it should be a crime for high schoolers to do math before 10 a.m. in the morning, let alone before 8 a.m. in the morning, but that was my life when I was an 11th grader, okay? So AP calculus, the first class of the day. I don't know how I survived. But anyway, so I'm going to AP calculus, first class of the day, and in walks Mrs. Pell, my calculus teacher. Mrs. Pell is a sweetheart. I love Mrs. Pell. She's a great teacher. But that morning, she walks in all chippery, and she says that we're going to have a pop quiz. And all of a sudden, I didn't like Mrs. Pell anymore. And I was like, oh no, like what am I going to do? To make matters worse, like I wasn't even up to date on all the material we were learning. I wasn't really understanding what we were learning. And I was like, okay, I got time before the exam, so I'll be fine. But all of a sudden, Mrs. Pell called my bluff, and all of a sudden that morning, we were going to have a pop quiz. And I was like, so Mrs. Pell hands out the quizzes, and I'm like panicking. And I look at the quiz, I'm like, I am going to fail this quiz. You know, like I don't know anything on this exam. So I spent the next several minutes just trying to prove that I knew something about calculus. And so I turned in the paper dejectedly after the end of the quiz, and it was a long 24 hours before I got that paper back to see my grade. And let's just say I didn't fail the quiz, but I definitely didn't ace it either. And so I spent like the rest of that semester trying to improve my grade from that fateful pop quiz. In Matthew 22, Jesus has his own pop quiz. Jesus is hanging out with two religious groups of people, one called the Sadducees and one called the Pharisees. And the Sadducees had just given their pop quiz to Jesus, and he had passed. And so the Pharisees are like, hey, it's our turn. We're going to test Jesus. And so this is the pop quiz that the Pharisees give to Jesus. Let's begin reading in verse 34. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, a biblical expert, asked Jesus a question to test him. Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? Now, to us, this might not seem like that much of a pop quiz. It might seem like a really legitimate question, right? Especially if you stop to realize there are over 600 laws in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. And so it seems very legitimate for the Pharisees, as Jewish people at that time, to say, Jesus, there are a lot of laws that we're supposed to follow, over 600 of them. So which one is the greatest? Tell us which is the most important so we can at least get that one down. And that seems like a pretty legitimate question. But what the Pharisees were actually doing is they were trying to trap and trick Jesus. You see, because if they could get Jesus to say this law is the most important one, then it's like he's dismissing the credibility of all the other laws. And if Jesus would do that, they could call him a false teacher and nobody would have to listen to him anymore. It would be kind of like if you were the parent of 4 children and one of your children came to you and said, hey, mom or dad, which one of your kids is the favorite? You know that's a trick question, right? Like you should not answer that question. And it's the same thing with Jesus. Jesus knows this is a trick question. Or it'd be like if I told you guys, I love the Gospels, I love reading Matthew, Mark, and Luke, but John, that's my favorite. So we should only read the Gospel of John, right? And you'd be like, no, Hannah, let's stop playing favorites like that. We should read all of the Gospels. So this is what's going on as the Pharisees are trying to trick Jesus. Now, if I was Jesus, I probably would have been like, you know what, guys? All those 600 laws, they're great, so follow them, and it's okay. I don't need to tell you a favorite, just follow all 600, and it's going to be great. But instead, Jesus answers by quoting Scripture to them. This is Jesus' answer to this pop quiz. In verse 37, Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commands hang all the law and the prophets." Jesus answers this pop quiz by quoting one of the most central verses in the Hebrew Bible, a verse that every single Jewish person knew, that actually comes right out of Deuteronomy 6, 4 through 5. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone." And here's the important part. "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind." This verse was so central to Judaism, they even called it by a special name. They called it the Shema. The word Shema is a Hebrew word that just means hear or listen. So you can see how this verse begins with Shema, "Hear, O Israel." And so every Jewish person, no matter how young or old you are, you would recite this verse every morning and every night. In fact, it was such an important verse that Jewish people would write it on little slips of paper and they'd carry it with them all day long. Or they put it on little boxes outside their home. This was the center verse of the Jewish faith. It's a verse that everyone knew. It would be similar, I think, to, for us in Christianity, we could compare the Shema to John 3:16, right? And a lot of people know that verse. "For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whosoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life," right? Lots of us know and can say that verse. The same is true with the Shema, that every Jewish person knew this verse. It was at the center of the Jewish faith. And Jesus knew this. And so when they asked him, "Hey, Jesus, which commandment is the most important?" Jesus responded by quoting the Shema to them. I think it was like Jesus was saying, "Hey guys, you already know what the most important commandment is. You already say it every morning and every night. You know what the greatest commandment is, to love God, but I need you to actually live like that's true. I need you not just to say it every morning and every night, but I need you to actually orient your life to love God with all that you are and all that you have. Like, this is what it means to follow me. This is what it means to have a relationship with God." And Jesus doesn't stop there. In fact, he goes on in verse 39 when he says, "And a second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself." When Jesus says that the second command is like the first, I don't think he's just saying that these two commands are similar to one another. I think Jesus is going further to say that these two commands, to love God and love our neighbor, are equal. They're inseparable. In fact, you can't love God without loving your neighbor. In 1 John, there's a passage that talks about if we can't love people who we do see, how in the world can we love God who we can't see? That loving God and our neighbor are interconnected. They're inseparable and connected to one another. That this should be at the heart of Christianity. To love God and to love our neighbor. That's what Jesus says is the greatest commandment. And he wants us not just to know that, but to live that way. To love without limits. Now, there's a lot of things in our life that we really love, right? Like, I was joking with Linda earlier, some of us really love golf, right? Like, we just cannot wait to play golf, especially when the spring is coming and Sue's already smiling because you guys love golf, right? Like, woohoo, I'm all for the golf. So you guys are really excited about that, which is great. So we got some people who love golf. We got some other people who love watching certain TV shows or movies. Like you just can't wait till like your favorite movie comes out or the next episode of your show comes out. Some of us maybe love like baking, like we get really excited and passionate about that, or crafts or knitting, or some of us, we love eating really great food or scrolling through social media. There's a lot of great things that we love, right? It's good to have hobbies and to love and enjoy things. But even with the really good things in life, like we need limits around those. We need boundaries, right? So like if Linda and Sue played golf every single minute of every single day, that probably wouldn't be good for you guys, right? Like we'd be concerned, right? You need limits on how much you enjoy even the things you really love in life. Or if, like, we binge-watched our favorite Netflix show all day long, that's not good, right? You need limits on good things in life. Or an example we could all think about is you go to an all-you-can-eat buffet, and there are no limits on how much you can eat, right? And so we just go and stuff ourselves, and then we feel miserable afterwards, right? And we're like, I should have had better boundaries or limits on how much I ate, right? So limits can be a good thing, even on good things that we love. Like, we should limit how much we work and how much money we spend and how much we play, right? It's good to have boundaries in our life. But there's one thing in our life that I think we shouldn't have limits on. There's one thing in our life that's really important, and it's ironic to me because it's the one thing in our life that we often do put limits on. And that one thing is our relationship with God. You see, I think we're called to love God without limits, that we shouldn't have boundaries and set parameters of that, but that we should love God with all that we are and all that we have. But the ironic thing is that we often try to limit our relationship with God. Like we limit it just to our time together on Sunday mornings or our personal devotional time, if we even have that throughout the week, or Bible study, right? And so we just box in our relationship with God when really that should be one of the most important things in our life. In fact, the most important thing in our lives. That we should love God without limits. And maybe some of us even remember a time when we were so in love with God, that it was just so empowering in our lives. In fact, I remember I was just a young girl in summer camp when I first fell in love with Jesus. And that night, after this worship service, I wanted to stay up and sing and pray all night long because I felt that in love, that close with Jesus. And maybe some of you had similar experiences at various points in your life. But what happens is, as we grow and get older in time, sometimes that love wanes. And we don't feel as close and connected in our relationship with God. And it sometimes just slips out of the importance and isn't our most important piece of our life. And I hope this morning that we're reminded that to love God should be the most important thing in our life. Not just to say that, but to actually live like it's true. To love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. So I have just one question for us this morning. What is it in our lives that we need to limit so that our love for God can be without limits? As we mentioned earlier, Lent is coming up, which is a season leading up to Easter, where Christians for thousands of years have decided that they're going to go without something so that they have more time and space in their life to connect with Jesus. And I think this is a great time of year to begin to ask ourselves this question: God, what do I need to limit or go without, or at least not so much in my life, so that it doesn't become all-consuming, but that I have more space and time in my life for my relationship with you, which should be the most important thing in my life? What do we need to limit so that our love for God can be without limits? Church, we're going to talk more about this in the days to come, of how we can love God and love others and how that can change our lives and change the world. But this morning, I hope that you begin with focusing on your relationship with Jesus. Because if you don't love God with all that you are and all that you have, it's really hard to love other people. And it's really hard to obey God's commands, right? We should love God, and that love should be the motive for our obedience. We shouldn't obey God simply out of obligation, but out of love. And if you love God, you're going to be able to live in the way God desires all of us to live. And I think that kind of lifestyle has potential to change the world. This morning, I wanted to give us an opportunity to hopefully experience God's love together right now in this space. To experience God's incredible love for us and to hopefully reflect that love back to God and to be reminded of how much we love Jesus. I alluded to this earlier, but after Jesus had died and then risen again and was with his disciples, Jesus called one of his disciples, one of his closest friends named Peter. And Jesus and Peter went for a walk along the beach. Peter, just a couple days before this, had denied Jesus 3 times, had denied that he even knew Jesus. But Jesus called Peter over and said, Peter, let's go for a walk. I want to ask you a question. And so I'm going to read this passage out of John 21 this morning, but what I want to invite you to do as we read this passage, I'm going to invite you just to close your eyes. And so you can go ahead and just close your eyes. And I want you just to listen to the words of this passage. And as you listen to these words, I want you to listen for just one word that stands out to you from this passage. And so I'll read this passage, and then there'll be just a brief moment of silence. And then I'll ask you, just where you are seated in your pew, to name the one word that stands out to you. So hear these words and listen for one word that speaks to you this morning. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Feed my lambs. A second time, he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, Do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go. He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, Jesus said to him, Follow me. This time, I invite you to name the one word that stood out to you from this passage. Follow. Hear these words a second time. With your eyes closed, listen this time for one phrase that stands out to you. And after I have finished reading the passage, I invite you to name that phrase aloud. When they'd finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, Feed my lambs. Second time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, Yes, Lord, You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter felt hurt because he had said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go. He said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. After this, Jesus said to him, follow me.
Love. Tend my lambs.
I'm going to read the passage a third and final time. And this time with your eyes still closed. I want you to listen to these words. And I want you to allow a prayer to arise in your heart. Then after I've finished reading the passage, I invite you to share that prayer as simple or short, as long as you feel led, that we could have a time of prayer together based on what Jesus stirs in our hearts this morning. So hear these words and allow a prayer to arise in your heart. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my lambs. A second time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said to him, tend my sheep. He said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go. He said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. After this, he said to him, follow me. This time I invite you to share the prayer of your heart, either silently or out loud, as we pray together this morning.
Lord, help us to love you with all of our heart and soul and mind, to love others, and help us to remember your commission to us that we should go out and love others and to feed your sheep, to take this mission with us each day.
Lord, forgive us the times that we fail to love you. When we put you in a box, set you off to the side. God, help us to love you with all that we are, all that we have. God, we don't always know how to do that. I confess I don't always know how to do that. But God, I pray that you would take this moment, this humble offering, as a prayer to you, that we could sing and cry out our love to you. So God, this is our song of love to you this morning. I love you, Lord, and I lift my voice to worship you. Oh, my soul, rejoice. Take joy, my King, in what you hear. May it be a sweet, sweet sound in your ear. Let's sing it together. The words are on the screen. I love you, Lord, and I lift my voice to worship you. Oh, my soul, rejoice. Take joy, my King, in what you hear. May it be a sweet, sweet sound in your ear. One more time. We love you, Lord, and we lift our voice to worship you. Oh, our soul, rejoice. Take joy, our King, in what you hear. May it be a sweet, sweet sound in your ear. May it be a sweet, sweet sound in your ear. God, that's our prayer. That we love you. And we want to praise you and worship you. God, draw us closer to you each and every day, that our love would overflow for you. In the powerful name of Jesus we pray.